The Battle of Britain. With France conquered, Hitler could now turn his forces on Germany's sole remaining enemy, Great Britain, which was protected from the formidable German army by the waters of the English Channel. On July 16, 1940, Hitler issued a directive ordering the preparation and, if necessary, the execution of a plan for the invasion of Great Britain. But an amphibious invasion of Britain would only be possible, given Britain's large navy, if Germany could establish control of the air in the battle zone. To this end, the Luftwaffe chief, Göring, on August 2 issued the Eagle Day Directive, laying down a plan of attack in which a few massive blows from the air were to destroy British air power and so open the way for the amphibious invasion, termed Operation Sea Lion. Victory in the air battle for the Luftwaffe would indeed have exposed Great Britain to invasion and occupation. The victory by the Royal Air Force RAF Fighter Command blocked this possibility and, in fact, created the conditions for Great Britain's survival, for the extension of the war, and for the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. The forces engaged in the battle were relatively small. The British disposed some 600 front-line fighters to defend the country. The Germans made available about 1,300 bombers and dive bombers, and about 900 single-engined and 300 twin-engined fighters. These were based in an arc around England from Norway to the Cherbourg Peninsula in northern coastal France. The preliminaries of the Battle of Britain occupied June and July 1940, the climax August and September, and the aftermath the so-called Blitz the winter of 1940–41. In the campaign, the Luftwaffe had no systematic or consistent plan of action. Sometimes it tried to establish a blockade by the destruction of British shipping and ports, sometimes, to destroy Britain's fighter command by combat and by the bombing of ground installations, and sometimes, to seek direct strategic results by attacks on London and other populous centres of industrial or political significance. Equipment and undivided aim, but also against an enemy divided in object and condemned by circumstance and by lack of forethought to fight at a tactical disadvantage. The German bombers lacked the bomb load capacity to strike permanently devastating blows and also proved, in daylight, to be easily vulnerable to the Spitfires and Hurricanes. Britain's radar, moreover, largely prevented them from exploiting the element of surprise. The German dive bombers were even more vulnerable to being shot down by British fighters, and long-range fighter cover was only partially available from German fighter aircraft, since the latter were operating at the limit of their flying range. The German air attacks began on ports and airfields along the English Channel, where convoys were bombed and the air battle was joined. In June and July 1940, as the Germans gradually redeployed their forces, the air battle moved inland over the interior of Britain. On August 8 the intensive phase began, when the Germans launched bombing raids involving up to nearly 1,500 aircraft a day and directed them against the British fighter airfields and radar stations. In 4 actions, on August 8, 11, 12, and 13, the Germans lost 145 aircraft as against the British loss of 88. By late August the Germans had lost more than 600 aircraft, the RAF only 260, but the RAF was losing badly needed fighters and experienced pilots at too great a rate, and its effectiveness was further hampered by bombing damage done to the radar stations. At the beginning of September the British retaliated by unexpectedly launching a bombing raid on Berlin, which so infuriated Hitler that he ordered the Luftwaffe to shift its attacks from fighter command installations to London and other cities. These assaults on London, Coventry, Liverpool, and other cities went on unabated for several months. But already, by September 15, on which day the British believed, albeit incorrectly, that they had scored their greatest success by destroying 185 German aircraft, Fighter Command had demonstrated to the Luftwaffe that it could not gain air ascendancy over Britain. This was because British fighters were simply shooting down German bombers faster than German industry could produce them. The Battle of Britain was thus won, and the invasion of England was postponed indefinitely by Hitler. The British had lost more than 900 fighters but had shot down about 1,700 German aircraft. During the following winter, the Luftwaffe maintained a bombing offensive, carrying out night bombing attacks on Britain's larger cities. By February 1941 the offensive had declined, but in March and April there was a revival, and nearly 10,000 sorties were flown, with heavy attacks made on London. Thereafter German strategic air operations over England withered. Central Europe and the Balkans, 1940–41. The continued resistance of British caused Hitler once more to change his timetable. His great design for a campaign against the USSR had originally been scheduled to begin about 1943, by which time he should have secured the German position on the rest of the European continent by a series of localized campaigns and have reached some sort of compromise with Great Britain. But in July 1940, seeing Great Britain still undefeated and the United States increasingly inimical to Germany, he decided that the conquest of the European part of the Soviet Union must be undertaken in May 1941 in order both to demonstrate Germany's invincibility to Great Britain and to deter the United States from intervention in Europe, because the elimination of the USSR would strengthen the Japanese position in the Far East and in the Pacific. Events in the interval, however, were to make him change his plan once again. While the invasion of the USSR was being prepared, Hitler was much concerned to extend German influence across Slovakia and Hungary into Romania, the oil fields of which he was anxious to secure against Soviet attack and the military manpower of which might be joined to the Treaty of Craiova on September 7, but its negotiations with Hungary about Transylvania were broken off on August 23. Since, if war had broken out between Romania and Hungary, the USSR might have intervened and won control over the oil wells, Hitler decided to arbitrate immediately. By the Vienna Award of August 30, Germany and Italy assigned northern Transylvania, including the Zekler district, to Hungary, and Germany then guaranteed what was left of Romania. In the face of the Romanian nationalists' outcry against these proceedings, the king, Carol II, transferred his dictatorial powers to General Ion Antonescu on Sept. 4, 1940, and abdicated his crown in favor of his young son Michael 2 days later. Antonescu had already repeated the request for a German military mission, which arrived in Bucharest on October 12. Though Hitler had apprised the Italian foreign minister, Galeazzo Ciano, of his intention to send a military mission to Romania, Ciano had not apprised Mussolini. So, since the latter's Balkan ambitions had been continually restrained by Hitler, particularly with regard to Yugoslavia, the sudden news of the mission annoyed him. On October 28, 1940, therefore, having given Hitler only the barest hints of his project, Mussolini launched 7 Italian divisions, 155,000 men from Albania, into a separate war of his own against Greece. The result was exasperating for Hitler. His allies' forces were not only halted by the Greeks, a few miles over the border, on November 8, 1940, but were also driven back by General Alexandros Papagos' counter-offensive of November 14. Which was to put the Greeks in possession of 1/3 of Albania by mid-December. Moreover, British troops landed in Crete, and some British aircraft were sent to bases near Athens, whence they might have attacked the Romanian oil fields. Lastly, the success of the Greeks caused Yugoslavia and Bulgaria, who had hitherto been attentive to overtures from the Axis powers, to revert to a strictly neutral policy. Anticipating Mussolini's appeal for German help in his separate or parallel war, Hitler in November 1940 drew Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia successively into the Axis, or tripartite, pact that Germany, Italy, and Japan had concluded on September 27. See below. Japanese policy, 1939–41, and he also obtained Romania's assent to the assembling of German troops in the south of Romania for an attack on Greece through Bulgaria. Hungary consented to the transit of these troops through its territory lest Romania take Hungary's place in Germany's favor and so be secured in possession of the Transylvanian lands left to it by the Vienna Award. Bulgaria, however, for fear of Soviet reaction, on the one hand, and of Turkish, on the other. Turkey had massed 28 divisions in Thrace when Italy attacked Greece, delayed its adhesion to the Axis until March 1, 1941. Only thereafter, on March 18, did the Yugoslav regent, Prince Paul, and his ministers Dragišić Vetković and Aleksandar Sakarmarković agree to Yugoslavia's adhesion to the Axis. Meanwhile, the German 12th Army had crossed the Danube from Romania into Bulgaria on March 2, 1941. Consequently, in accordance with the Greco-British Agreement of February 21, a British expeditionary force of 58,000 men from Egypt landed in Greece on March 7, to occupy the Olympus, Vermian line. Then, on March 27, 1941, 2 days after the Yugoslav government's signature, in Vienna, of its adhesion to the Axis Pact, a group of Yugoslav army officers, led by General Dusan Samovic, executed a coup d'état in Belgrade, overthrowing the regency in favor of the 17-year-old King Peter II and reversing the former government's policy. Almost simultaneously with the Belgrade coup d'état, the decisive Battle of Cape Matapan took place between the British and Italian fleets in the Mediterranean, off the Peloponnesian mainland northwest of Crete. Hitherto, Italo-British naval hostilities in the Mediterranean area since June 1940 had comprised only one noteworthy action, the sinking in November at the Italian naval base of Taranto of 3 battleships by aircraft from the British carrier Illustrious. In March 1941, however, some Italian naval forces, including the battleship Vittorio Veneto, with several cruisers and destroyers, set out to threaten British convoys to Greece, and British forces, including the battleships Warspite, Valiant, and Barham and the aircraft carrier Formidable, likewise with cruisers and destroyers, were sent to intercept them. When the forces met in the morning of March 28, off Cape Matapan, the Vittorio Veneto opened fire on the lighter British ships but was soon trying to escape from the engagement, for fear of the torpedo aircraft from the Formidable. The battle then became a pursuit, which lasted long into the night. Finally, though the severely damaged Vittorio Veneto made good her escape, the British sank 3 Italian cruisers and 2 destroyers. The Italian Navy made no more surface ventures into the eastern Mediterranean. The German attack on Greece, scheduled for April 1, 1941, was postponed for a few days when Hitler, because of the Belgrade coup d'état, decided that Yugoslavia was to be destroyed at the same time. While Great Britain's efforts to draw Yugoslavia into the Greco-British defensive system were fruitless, Germany began canvassing allies for its planned invasion of Yugoslavia and Greece. Italy agreed to collaborate in the attack, and Hungary and Bulgaria agreed to send troops to occupy the territories that they coveted as soon as the Germans should have destroyed the Yugoslav state. On April 6, 1941, the Germans, with 24 divisions and 1,200 tanks, invaded both Yugoslavia, which had 32 divisions, and Greece, which had 15 divisions. The operations were conducted in the same way as Germany's previous Blitzkrieg campaigns. While massive air raids struck Belgrade, List's 12th Army drove westward and southward from the Bulgarian frontiers, Kleist's armored group northwestward from Sofia, and Wake's 2nd Army southward from Austria and from western Hungary. The 12th Army's advance through Skopje to the Albanian border cut communications between Yugoslavia and Greece in 2 days. NIS fell to Kleist on April 9, Zagreb Towices on April 10, and on April 11 the Italian Second Army comprising 15 divisions advanced from Istria into Dalmatia. After the fall of Belgrade to the German forces from bases in Romania April 12, the remnant of the Yugoslav army whose only offensive, in northern Albania, had collapsed was encircled in Bosnia. Its capitulation was signed, in Belgrade, on April 17. In Greece, meanwhile, the Germans took Salonika Thessaloniki on April 9, 1941, and then initiated a drive toward Ioannina Yanina, thus severing communication between the bulk of the Greek army which was on the Albanian frontier and its rear. The isolated main body capitulated on April 20, the Greek army as a whole on April 22. 2 days later the pass of Thermami into captivity as German prisoners of war. In the campaign against Greece the Germans took 220,000 Greek and 20,000 British or Commonwealth prisoners of war. The combined German losses in the Balkan campaigns were about 2,500 dead, 6,000 wounded, and 3,000 missing. German airborne troops began to land in Crete on May 20, 1941, at Malm, in the Kaniasuta area, at Rethymnon, and at Iraklion. Fighting, on land and on the sea, with heavy losses on both sides, went on for a week before the Allied Commander-in-Chief, General Bernard Cyril Freyberg of the New Zealand Expeditionary Force, was authorized to evacuate the island. The last defenders were overwhelmed at Rethymnon on May 31. The prisoners of war taken by the Germans in Crete numbered more than 15,000 British or Commonwealth troops, besides the Greeks taken. In battles around the island, German air attacks sank 3 light cruisers and 6 destroyers of the British Mediterranean Fleet and damaged 3 battleships, 1 aircraft carrier, 6 light cruisers, and 5 destroyers. Both the Yugoslav and the Greek royal governments went into exile on their army's collapse. The Axis powers were left to dispose as they would of their conquests. Yugoslavia was completely dissolved. Croatia, the independence of which had been proclaimed on April 10, 1941, was expanded to form Great Croatia, which included Srem Sirmia, the zone between the Sava and the Danube south of the Drava confluence, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Most of Dalmatia was annexed to Italy. Montenegro was restored to independence. Yugoslav Macedonia was partitioned between Bulgaria and Albania. Slovenia was partitioned between Italy and Germany. The Baranja Triangle and the Bačka went to Hungary. The Banat and Serbia were put under German military administration. Of the independent states, Great Croatia, ruled by Ante Pavlik's nationalist Ustase insurgents, and Montenegro were Italian spheres of influence, although German troops still occupied the eastern part of Great Croatia. A puppet government of Serbia was set up by the Germans in August 1941. While Bulgarian troops occupied eastern Macedonia and most of western Thrace, the rest of mainland Greece, theoretically subject to a puppet government in Athens, was militarily occupied by the Italians except for 3 zones, namely the Athens district, the Salonika district, and the Dimatika strip of Thrace, which the German conquerors reserved for themselves. The Germans also remained in occupation of Lesbos, Chios, Samos, Melos, and Crete.